Chapter 16 of The House on the Downs by Gladys Edson Locke. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Checkmate. Irene Grayle was summoned next. Tension in the courtroom ran high as the actress-manageress seated herself in the witness box. Out of that sea of faces, turned toward her for the most part in undisguised curiosity and appraisal, her gaze sought out and seemed to see just one, Mark's. He tried to convey to her his sympathy and confidence and staunch friendship. The coroner began his preliminary questions amidst a dead silence. Irene, in quiet, steady tones, gave a brief account of her professional association with Craddock Rayner. 3 years ago she had engaged him as a juvenile lead. He was already known to her by reputation as a provincial repertory actor of some promise. Within a year she had advanced him to the position of first lead. The coroner looked down at certain memoranda on the table before him. After a minute, he turned from these papers to the witness. During the 3 years in which the deceased was a member of your company, did you know or come to suspect that he had some entanglement with any woman or women? I did not, said Irene, somewhat sharply. If I had, I should not have become engaged to marry him. When was this proposed marriage to take place? We had not decided upon the date. You will remember the engagement was not announced until Wednesday evening. Only a few hours, then, before Mr. Rayner was murdered, the coroner insinuated. Irene closed her eyes for a moment. Yes, she assented, in a barely audible voice. Now, Miss Grayle, the coroner went on relentlessly, between the announcement of your engagement on Wednesday evening and the hour of the murder on Thursday afternoon, did you discover or have reason to suspect any feminine entanglement in the life of the deceased? No, she answered, in the same low-breathed tone. You received no letter, telephone, visit, or other communication from any woman in reference to Mr. Rayner? Irene looked above the heads of the spectators. No, she responded again, a little more loudly. The coroner straightened to the attack. Then why did you drive in a taxicab to the vicinity of Rotherdene Hollow, where Craddock Rayner was murdered, within approximately 3/4 of an hour or less after your arrival there? Complete silence fell on the room. Mark struggled with a desire to smite the coroner as he sat there in judgment on Irene. The actress-manageress turned a very pale but self-possessed face upon her interrogator. I was tired out from my work at the theater. I hoped a drive through the peaceful downland village would freshen me up for the evening. I had heard of the picturesqueness of Rotherdene. Hadn't you heard also, bullied the coroner, that Craddock Rayner, your affianced husband, was the recipient of letters and telephones from a woman in the vicinity of Rotherdene? That he was, in fact, going that afternoon to keep an appointment with her in Rotherdene Hollow? An almost defiant expression came into Irene's eyes. I suppose it would be useless to make a denial. Just so, the coroner agreed. How and when did you learn these facts relative to the deceased? I declined to answer. Miss Grayle, admonished the coroner, his voice bland and suave, now that he had scored an important point. You will not help yourself by a refusal to reply. The actress-manageress gave a weary little smile. I am not on trial, I presume? The coroner allowed this to pass, contenting himself with another leading question. Who was the woman with whom the deceased had an appointment in Rotherdene Hollow? I decline to answer that question also. The coroner showed signs of irritation. Perhaps you will be kind enough to inform the court why you refuse to name this woman? I think, said Irene in a low, firm voice, that she has suffered enough through Craddock Rayner. The coroner stroked his heavy chin, surveying her speculatively. What was your purpose in going to Rotherdene Hollow? Irene hesitated and glanced at the eagerly listening spectators. Then she turned again to the coroner. I did not go for any sensational purpose. I simply wanted to question Mr. Rayner in the presence of the woman he had gone to meet. I had to find out if my informant had given me the true facts about Mr. Rayner. You still decline to state the name of your informant and the alleged facts divulged by this person? I do. Her tone and manner unyielding. The coroner leaned back in his chair and settled his spectacles. Did you question the deceased and his woman companion? The actress-manageress shivered slightly. No. The monosyllable so faint that it scarcely carried to the ears of the jury. Why not? snapped the coroner. Irene's fingers gripped the arms of the chair. The woman was not there. But Rayner, wasn't he there? Horror convulsed Irene's features. Mr. Rayner was dead. A wave of excitement swept over the court. The coroner eyed the witness with severity. Describe the condition of the deceased and his surroundings. For a moment, Irene seemed on the verge of a collapse. Then, with a visible effort, she pulled herself together. Mr. Rayner was just as other witnesses have described him. He was lying partly on his side with one arm outstretched. There was blood oozing over his collar and the shoulder of his coat, blood on the heather and the bushes, a horrible sight. She shuddered and closed her eyes, as though to shut out the memory of it. The coroner's expression was uncompromising. Did you hear or see any person in or near the hollow? No. What did you do when you discovered the body? I am afraid I fled from the hollow. Did you notice anyone about when you emerged from it? I was too dazed and too horrified to notice anything. I went up on the downs and walked until I saw the Brighton bus coming. I reached Mrs. Peller's about 6:15. As you know, my nerves gave way completely, and I was unable to act that evening. The coroner bent toward her across the table. Why did you not report Rayner's murder? I hardly knew what I was about. I could think only of one thing, to get away from it all. But when you reached Brighton, you must have recollected that Rayner's absence from the theater that evening would have to be accounted for. Irene's distraught eyes avoided the coroner's. I tell you, my nerves went to pieces. I could think of nothing. Very well, that will do, said the coroner gravely. Mark wanted to go forward and assist Irene to her seat, but he felt that she would not wish him to do so. Eve was the next witness. Sir Quenton, his face gone curiously gray, watched his young wife as she was sworn in. Eve exhibited a studied and graceful composure. Her blonde loveliness had never shown to better advantage than now when she confronted the avid throng in the drab courtroom. In her smart costume, modeled in strict accord with the dictates of Paris, she seemed the embodiment of youth, beauty, and allurement. Quenton Rotherdene's somber gaze never left Eve's face. Once she glanced at him, and a suggestion of a smile played for a moment at the corners of her lips. The coroner lost no time in getting to the point. How long had your ladyship known the deceased? Eve arched her eyebrows in surprise. I did not know, Craddock Rayner. Did not know him? Almost shouted the coroner. Not personally, no. Eve spoke with inimitable composure. I saw him once on the stage at the Theatre Royal in Brighton, about 2 weeks ago, when I gave a box party there. Would that be the night your ladyship was taken suddenly faint, while the first act was on? I suppose it was that night. I have not been to the theatre since I gave that box party. The ventilation was very bad. It is a wonder no one else fainted. Her tone held a certain slight defiance. The coroner consulted his notes. Your ladyship, he said impressively, I shall have to draw your attention to the result of an investigation which Inspector Haskett made at the Theatre Royal in Brighton, relative to the affairs of the deceased. To save time, I shall not recall Inspector Haskett, but for the benefit of the gentlemen of the jury, as well as yourself, I propose to read aloud certain items of information which the inspector succeeded in eliciting. They are as follows. The deceased made particular inquiries as to the name of the lady who had fainted during his opening speech. When told who you were, he said you resembled a girl he had met several years ago. Furthermore, your ladyship, on Thursday noon the deceased inquired of the stage doorkeeper, who is a native of this village, the shortest motor route to Rotherdene Grange, where he said he was going to call. Now, in view of this testimony, the coroner laid down his notes and looked fixedly at the witness. Do you still deny that you were personally acquainted with the deceased? I protest, Mr. Coroner, cried Sir Quenton explosively, rising to his feet. If you desire to give evidence later, Sir Quenton, the coroner began courteously, I will allow an opportunity for you to do so, but I cannot sustain your objection now. The baronet sat down. He seemed to have aged 10 years since the inquest opened. Every neck was craned toward Eve. Her forced composure still held her, only her fluttering hands and quick-drawn breath evinced her suspense. The coroner repeated his question. I was not personally acquainted with Craddock Rayner, Eve answered, a half-insolent, half-defiant note in her voice. "But you had corresponded with him?" persisted the coroner. "No," she denied. From the box on the desk before him, the coroner drew forth again the platinum bracelet set with diamonds. "Is this your bracelet?" he asked curtly. Eve was entirely self-possessed now. "It is my bracelet," she admitted steadily. "I have not seen it for over 10 days. I have reason to believe it was stolen from me." "By whom, your ladyship?" Eve's blue eyes were cold as steel. "By my maid, Cynthia Melsom. I have missed several articles since she has been in my service." The coroner, to Eve's apparent disappointment, did not press the point. Instead, he abruptly shifted the trend of his inquiry. "Did you have an appointment to meet the deceased in Rotherdene Hollow on the afternoon of Thursday last?" "I have already said that I was not personally acquainted with Craddock Rayner, nor had ever corresponded with him." She spoke sharply. "That is not answering my question," the coroner reminded her. "I had no appointment to meet Mr. Rayner," she said with frigid calmness. "Then why," flashed the coroner, "were you walking on the downs in the direction of Rotherdene Hollow between 3 and 4 o'clock on the afternoon of Thursday last?" The color ebbed slowly from Eve's cheeks, then swept back in a deep flood. "I was looking for my husband's protégée, Fazenta Lee." "You expected to find her in Rotherdene Hollow?" "It was always a favorite haunt of hers. She is a gypsy, you know." Eve's manner was guarded, her well-bred, somewhat languorous voice held a slightly contemptuous note. "Did you know or suspect that Miss Lee intended to meet Mr. Rayner, or anyone, in fact, in Rotherdene Hollow?" "Oh, no," said Eve, the veiled insolence in her voice becoming more obvious. "I know nothing whatever of Fazenta Lee's affairs. I only fancied I might find her there." "Why was it necessary for you to find her, then?" "I was giving a dinner party that evening, and my husband was expecting a guest, Mr. Mark Brandon, in the afternoon. I thought Fazenta might be of assistance." "Did you find Miss Lee in Rotherdene Hollow?" "No," Eve answered quickly. "No one was there." "About what time would this be?" "I did not have my watch with me. About 3:30, I should say." The coroner stroked his chin again, studying the witness intently. "Are you willing to swear you did not see Craddock Rayner in Rotherdene Hollow, alive or dead?" Eve's color waned again. "I did not see him at all. I saw no one." The coroner did not relax his hard scrutiny. "You were wearing moonflowers?" "No!" Eve's voice rose in pitch. "I did not put on a bouquet of moonflowers until I returned to the Grange, until just before I went down to receive my guests." "Where did you go when you left the Hollow?" "I went directly back to the Grange." The coroner, with gaze steadily fastened on the witness, made a quick movement with his hand. He drew from the box in front of him and flashed before Eve's startled eyes the slim, bodkin-like poniard with jeweled hilt and keen blade, stained and tarnished. Eve's taut nerves gave way, and she broke into a low, choking cry. "Is this your knife?" the coroner demanded, relentlessly. "I had it for a paper cutter," she answered faintly. "I kept it on the desk in my sitting room, and the door into the hall was always unlocked. Anyone at the Grange could have had access to it. I do not remember seeing that paper cutter since last Thursday morning when I opened some letters with it." "Quite so," said the coroner dryly. He turned with a portentous mien to the jury, glancing along either row of solemn, stolid countenances on both sides of the long table. "Would any of you gentlemen like to ask the witness a question?" Apparently, none of the Rotherdene henchmen composing the jury would venture to question the titled mistress of the Grange. So the coroner, receiving no reply, directed Eve to stand down and adjourned the inquest until after luncheon. Sir Quenton, his face set in rigid lines, came forward and assisted Eve from the box. His manner was kind but remote, and he said nothing to his young wife. End of chapter 16.